When the Alpha King's storm-gray eyes locked onto the rejected Omega girl practicing forbidden warrior moves in secret, everything Lyra thought she knew about her worthless place in the pack hierarchy shattered in an instant, as the most powerful shifter in the realm offered her a position as his personal guard, ignoring centuries of tradition and the fury of every high-ranking wolf who'd spent years stepping on her back. One question burned through her mind and would soon shake the foundations of their world. What happens when the king who sees her true worth harbors the same shameful secret that made her an outcast? The kitchen knife slipped, and blood dripped onto the chopping board like tears Lyra had stopped crying years ago. She sucked her finger, tasting copper and failure, while the head cook's voice boomed across the steamy kitchen like thunder before a storm. Clumsy Omega. Can't even cut carrots without bleeding all over the Alpha's dinner. Cook Martha's face turned red as a tomato, her thick arms waving like tree branches in a hurricane. 22 years old and still making mistakes a pup wouldn't make. Lyra's wolf whimpered inside her chest, a sad little sound that matched the ache in her heart. Every day started the same way, with someone telling her she wasn't good enough, smart enough, or strong enough. The other kitchen workers snickered behind their hands, their whispers sharp as the knives they used to prepare meals for wolves who mattered. "Sorry, Cook Martha," Lyra whispered, grabbing a clean rag to wipe away the blood. Her voice came out small and quiet, like a mouse trying to talk to lions. "I'll be more careful." "Careful?" Beta Marcus stepped into the kitchen, his boots clicking on the stone floor like a judge's hammer. His blue eyes sparkled with the kind of mean joy that came from watching others hurt. "The reject Omega knows about being careful? That's rich." The kitchen went silent except for the bubbling soup pots. Everyone knew Marcus loved making Lyra feel small. He'd been doing it since they were children, back when she still hoped things might change, back when she still believed the fairy tales about ugly ducklings becoming swans. "I was just," Lyra started, but Marcus cut her off with a wave of his hand. "Just what? Dreaming about being something you're not?" He laughed, and the sound made her stomach twist like a pretzel. "Face facts, Lyra. You're Omega, bottom of the pack. Your parents dumped you here because even they couldn't stand having such a weak daughter." The words hit harder than any punch could. Lyra's parents had died in a car crash when she was 5. But Marcus never let truth get in the way of a good insult. She bit her lip to keep from crying, tasting more blood. "That's enough, Marcus." The voice came from the doorway, soft but carrying the kind of power that made everyone straighten up like soldiers. Alpha Thornwick stepped into the kitchen, his gray hair neat as always, his dark suit making him look like a businessman instead of a wolf leader. "Leave the girl alone." Marcus's face changed faster than a light switch being flipped. "Of course, Father. I was just checking on the dinner preparations." "Then check somewhere else." Alpha Thornwick's eyes found Lyra's, and for a moment she saw something that might have been kindness. "Carry on, child." After they left, the kitchen slowly came back to life. But Lyra felt like a deflated balloon, all the air sucked out of her. She finished cutting the carrots with shaking hands, each slice precise despite her upset feelings. Cooking was one of the few things she was actually good at, though nobody ever seemed to notice. "Don't let them get to you," whispered Jenny, the youngest kitchen maid. She was only 16 and still believed in happy endings. "My grandmother always said that diamonds are just coal that handled pressure well." Lyra almost smiled at that. "Almost. Thanks, Jenny, but I think some coal is just meant to stay coal." The dinner rush began like a tornado touching down. Orders flew through the kitchen faster than birds, and Lyra found herself moving in the familiar dance of cooking, serving, and staying invisible. She carried trays of food to the dining hall, where the important wolves sat at long wooden tables, laughing and talking about pack business she'd never be allowed to hear. Beta Marcus sat at the head table next to his father, his arm around Elena Blackthorn from the neighboring pack. She was everything Lyra wasn't. Tall, beautiful, confident, with the kind of golden hair that looked like it belonged in shampoo commercials. Elena caught Lyra staring and smiled. But it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a cat watching a mouse in a trap. "Careful where you look, kitchen girl." Elena's voice carried across the hall like a bell. "Some sights aren't meant for Omega eyes." More laughter rippled through the room, and Lyra felt her cheeks burn hot as fire. She hurried back to the kitchen, her heart pounding like drums in her chest. This was her life, invisible until someone wanted to use her as entertainment. But as she scrubbed dishes in the big metal sink, something strange happened. Through the kitchen window, she could see the forest beyond the pack grounds, dark and mysterious under the evening sky. Her wolf stirred restlessly, wanting to run, to be free, to be something more than what everyone said she was. "What are you looking at?" Cook Martha asked, following her gaze. Lyra didn't answer right away. She couldn't explain the feeling building inside her chest, like storm clouds gathering before lightning strikes. Something was coming, something that would change everything. But what? The forest called to Lyra like a song only she could hear, pulling her away from dirty dishes and cruel laughter into the cool darkness where nobody could tell her she was worthless. Her feet found the secret path she'd worn smooth over years of midnight escapes, leading deeper into the woods where ancient trees stood like giant guardians keeping watch. Moonlight filtered through the leaves above, painting silver patterns on the ground as she walked. Her wolf felt stronger here, braver, like it remembered what it meant to be wild. This was the only place where she could practice the fighting moves she'd learned by watching from shadows. The only place where she could pretend to be the warrior her heart insisted she was meant to be. She'd built a small clearing years ago, moving fallen logs to create targets and obstacles. Nobody from the pack ever came this deep into the woods. They were too comfortable in their warm houses, too busy with their important meetings and social games. But Lyra felt more at home among the trees than she ever did in the kitchen. Rolling her shoulders to work out the tension from another day of insults, she began her routine. First, the basic stances she'd memorized from watching the pack's training sessions. Her body moved with surprising grace, muscle memory taking over as she flowed from one position to another. "Block, counter, strike," she whispered to herself, practicing combinations that would make the pack warriors proud if they could see her. Duck, roll, sweep. The movements felt natural, like her body had been designed for fighting instead of serving soup. Her wolf purred with satisfaction, finally allowed to stretch and show its strength. For these precious moments, she wasn't the reject Omega who couldn't do anything right. She was a fighter. A twig snapped behind her. Lyra spun around, her hand automatically reaching for the small knife she kept hidden in her boot. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a bird trying to escape a cage. Had someone followed her? Was she about to get in trouble for being where she didn't belong, doing things she wasn't allowed to do? Well, what do we have here? The voice was deep and smooth, like warm honey mixed with thunder. A man stepped out of the shadows, and Lyra's breath caught in her throat like she'd swallowed a butterfly. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that looked like it had been tousled by the wind, and eyes the color of storm clouds. Power radiated from him like heat from a fire, making her wolf want to roll over and show its belly. But there was something else, something that made the wild part of her stand up and take notice instead of cowering. He wasn't looking at her like she was a bug to be stepped on. He was looking at her like she was interesting. "I'm sorry," Lyra stammered, taking a step backward. "I didn't know anyone else came out here. I'll leave." "Don't." The word came out like a gentle command, stopping her in her tracks. "I've been watching you practice. You move like a warrior, not a servant." Heat flooded her cheeks. How long had he been spying on her secret training? "I'm just playing around. I don't really know what I'm doing." He stepped closer, and she caught his scent on the night breeze, pine trees and steel, and something wild that made her pulse race like she'd been running. "Liar." The word should have stung, but the way he said it sounded almost like praise. Lyra lifted her chin, meeting his storm-gray eyes directly for the first time. "Who are you?" "Someone who recognizes talent when he sees it." His lips curved in what might have been a smile. The question is, who are you, really? Because the wolf I just watched training is nothing like the scared little Omega I've heard about from the pack gossip. Lyra's mouth fell open. He knew who she was? Had heard the stories about the pathetic reject who couldn't do anything right? Shame burned through her chest like acid. Then you know I'm nobody special. I know what people say. He moved closer again, close enough that she could see gold flecks in his gray eyes. But I also know that scared wolves don't train alone in the forest at midnight. Weak wolves don't move with the grace of a natural fighter. And wolves don't have the kind of inner strength I can practically taste in the air around you. Her wolf whimpered, confused by the compliments. Nobody had ever said such things about her before. You're making fun of me. I never joke about talent. His expression grew serious, intense, in a way that made her feel like he was looking right into her soul. What's your name? Lyra Ashworth. The words came out in a whisper. I work in the kitchens of Silver Moon Pack. Something shifted in his expression, like puzzle pieces clicking into place. Ashworth, I knew your parents. The world seemed to tilt sideways. You what? David and Sarah Ashworth. They were good wolves, honorable fighters. His voice grew gentle, almost sad. They would be proud of what you've become. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she blinked them away. I haven't become anything. I'm just a kitchen worker who dreams too big. Are you? He studied her face like he was reading a book written in a language only he understood. Or are you exactly what this pack needs, even if they're too blind to see it? Before she could ask what he meant, he stepped back and gave her a slight bow that seemed both formal and mocking. Until we meet again, Lyra Ashworth. Keep practicing. Something tells me you're going to need those skills sooner than you think. Wait, she called out. But he was already melting back into the shadows like he'd never been there at all. I don't even know your name. Only the wind answered her, rustling through the leaves, with what sounded almost like laughter. Lyra stood alone in her secret clearing, her heart racing and her mind spinning with questions. Who was the mysterious stranger who spoke of her parents like he'd known them personally? Why had he been watching her train? And what did he mean about her needing her fighting skills soon? Most importantly, why did some deep part of her wolf recognize his scent like coming home? The sound of breaking glass exploded through the morning air like a gunshot, and Lyra's heart stopped beating for 3 full seconds. She stood frozen in the Royal Wing's marble hallway, her new guard uniform still stiff with newness, watching crimson blood drip from Marcus's knuckles onto the white stone floor. Behind him stood 6 other wolves, their eyes glowing with the kind of hatred that burns everything it touches. Look what crawled out of the kitchen, Marcus sneered, his voice carrying down the corridor like poison. The little Omega thinks she belongs here now. Yesterday felt like a dream. King Damon choosing her. The beautiful room with actual windows, clean clothes that fit properly, food that didn't come from scraps. But dreams always end, and nightmares always feel more real. I have work to do, Lyra whispered, trying to step around them. Her wolf whimpered inside her chest, sensing danger like smoke before fire. Work? Marcus laughed, a sound sharper than the broken glass under his boots. You call pretending to be something you're not work? The other wolves spread out, blocking every exit. Lyra recognized them all, children who used to play together before the world taught them that some people matter less than others. Now they looked at her like she was something dirty they'd stepped in. The king made a mistake, said Sarah, a girl who once shared cookies with Lyra behind the schoolhouse. Mistakes need fixing. Lyra's hand moved toward the silver dagger at her belt, another gift from King Damon that felt too good to be real. But 7 against 1 meant she needed to be smart, not brave. He'll be looking for me soon, she said, proud when her voice didn't shake. No, he won't. Marcus smiled, pulling out a piece of paper. Royal business called him away. Emergency in the Northern Territory. Won't be back for 3 days. The words hit Lyra like ice water. 3 days alone with enemies who wanted to prove she didn't belong. 3 days to show everyone that putting an Omega in the royal wing was exactly as stupid as they'd said. But here's the thing about Omegas, Marcus continued, stepping closer. They break easy. The attack came fast and mean. Sarah grabbed for Lyra's left arm, while 2 boys reached for her right. But years of secret training kicked in like lightning, and Lyra moved like water flowing around rocks. She ducked under Sarah's grab, swept the legs of the boy on her right, and rolled behind a marble pillar before anyone could blink. The surprised shouts echoed off the high ceiling, mixing with her rapid heartbeat. "She's faster than she looks," someone muttered. "Doesn't matter," Marcus growled. "Corner her." What followed was the most terrifying game of hide-and-seek Lyra had ever played. Through the twisting corridors of the royal wing, past paintings of dead kings and queens who stared down with judgment in their painted eyes. Her soft shoes made no sound on the stone floors, but theirs did. 7 sets of footsteps hunting her like she was prey. She pressed herself into an alcove behind a statue of some ancient hero, breathing as quietly as possible while they searched nearby room. Through a window, she could see the morning sun painting everything gold and peaceful, like the world outside didn't know how quickly everything could fall apart. "Check the library," Marcus ordered. "Sarah, take the east wing. She can't hide forever." But hiding wasn't Lyra's plan anymore. King Damon had given her something precious, not just a job or a room or nice clothes. He'd given her a chance to be more than what everyone expected. She wouldn't let them take that away without a fight. When Marcus passed her hiding spot alone, she struck. Her shoulder hit his middle like a battering ram, sending him crashing into the opposite wall. Before he could recover, she had her dagger pressed against his throat, her hand steady despite the fear racing through her veins. "Call them off," she whispered. He laughed, even with silver touching his neck. "You think this changes anything? You think one lucky move makes you special?" "Maybe not," Lyra admitted, "but I think bleeding all over the king's clean floors might make him ask questions you don't want to answer." For a moment, Marcus looked uncertain. Then his smile returned, colder than winter wind. "You want to know a secret, little Omega?" His voice dropped so low she had to strain to hear it. "This isn't about you at all." Before she could ask what he meant, running footsteps echoed from 3 different directions. The others had found them. Lyra had exactly 2 seconds to decide: run and keep hiding like prey, or stand and fight like the warrior she'd trained herself to become. She chose to fight. But as 6 angry wolves surrounded her in the marble hallway, Marcus's words echoed in her mind like a warning bell. If this wasn't about her, then what was it really about? And why did she suddenly feel like a small piece in a much bigger, much more dangerous game? The fight lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. And by the end, Lyra understood 3 things that changed everything. First, she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. The secret years of training had built muscles that moved like springs and reflexes that turned her body into a weapon. When Sarah lunged for her face, Lyra caught her wrist and flipped her over her shoulder like she weighed nothing. When 2 boys tried to grab her from behind, she dropped low and swept their feet, sending them crashing into each other. Second, they weren't really trying to hurt her. Not badly, anyway. Their attacks pulled back at the last second. Their claws stayed sheathed, and nobody went for killing blows. They wanted her scared and humiliated, not dead. That realization made her bolder, fiercer, more willing to press her advantage. Third, and most important, Marcus kept checking the windows like he was waiting for something. "Enough!" she shouted after dropping the last attacker, breathing hard but victorious. 6 wolves lay groaning on the marble floor around her, their pride more bruised than their bodies. "It's over." But Marcus just smiled that cold, knowing smile. "No, little Omega. It's just beginning." That's when she heard it, the thunder of hooves on the stone courtyard outside. Lots of them, moving fast and purposeful. Through the tall windows, she could see riders in the black and silver colors of the Shadow Council. the group of powerful alphas who made laws for all the packs in the kingdom. You set this up, Lyra breathed, understanding flooding through her like cold water. The fight, the timing, everything. Smart girl, Marcus said, wiping blood from his lip, though not smart enough to see the bigger picture. The massive front doors of the palace slammed open, with a sound like breaking thunder. Heavy boots marched across the entrance hall, echoing off stone walls that had witnessed centuries of secrets and betrayals. Lyra's wolf pressed low in her chest, sensing predators far more dangerous than the young wolves she'd just defeated. Where is he? A voice boomed. Deep, commanding, and filled with the kind of authority that expected immediate answers. Where is the pretender who calls himself king? Alpha Cornelius Blackstone stepped into view, and Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She'd seen him once before, at a ceremony when she was small, a mountain of a man, with silver hair and scars, that told stories of battles won through violence and cunning. Behind him came 4 other council members, their faces hard as winter ground. Gone, Marcus said, climbing to his feet with obvious satisfaction. Emergency in the north, just like we planned. But we found something interesting in his absence. 5 pairs of alpha eyes turned toward Lyra like searchlights, and she felt her knees want to buckle under the weight of their attention. These weren't young wolves playing games of dominance. These were the most powerful predators in the kingdom, and she was standing in their path, wearing clothes that marked her as something she had no right to be. The Omega, Alpha Blackstone said, his voice flat with disgust. Marcus sent word about Damon's unusual choice in companions. She fought us, Sarah said, struggling to sit up. Moved like she'd been trained. No normal Omega could do what she just did. Interesting, another council member murmured, and troubling. Alpha Blackstone stepped closer, and Lyra fought every instinct that screamed at her to run. His scent was overwhelming, pine and leather, and the metallic tang of spilled blood. Power radiated from him in waves that made her wolf want to roll over and show her belly in submission. Tell me, little servant, he said quietly, what did the false king promise you for your services? The implication in his words hit Lyra like a slap. Heat flamed in her cheeks, but she kept her chin up and her voice steady. He promised me a chance to be more than what others decided I should be. Foolish child. Blackstone shook his head. Do you know what happens to Omegas who forget their place? Who reach for things beyond their station? Before Lyra could answer, he continued. They fall, hard and far, taking everyone stupid enough to lift them up right along with them. One of the other alphas stepped forward, a woman with ice blue eyes and silver streaked through her black hair. The question is whether she's a victim of Damon's manipulation or a willing participant in his deception. What deception? Lyra demanded, finding courage she didn't know she possessed. King Damon chose me as his guard because he saw potential everyone else ignored. That's not deception. That's wisdom. The alphas exchanged glances that spoke of shared secrets and plans already in motion. Guard? Alpha Blackstone laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Sweet child, you weren't chosen as a guard. You were chosen as bait. The words hit Lyra like a physical blow, stealing her breath and making the world tilt sideways. What? Did you really think the most powerful alpha in the kingdom suddenly decided to rescue a worthless Omega out of kindness? Marcus stepped closer, his eyes bright with malicious pleasure. You were the perfect tool, grateful, loyal, completely dependent on his protection. The ideal way to make his enemies underestimate him, while he planned other things. You're lying, Lyra whispered. But doubt crept into her voice like poison. Why would King Damon choose her? What could she possibly offer that hundreds of stronger, more qualified wolves could? The evidence is mounting, the female alpha said coldly. A peasant Omega suddenly elevated to the royal wing. Secret training sessions, private meetings behind closed doors. And now, conveniently, he disappears just as we arrive to investigate reports of his unusual interests. Lyra's hand went to the silver pendant at her throat, The wolf that King Damon said had belonged to his mother, the symbol of his faith in her worth. But what if it was just another manipulation, another way to ensure her loyalty while he used her for purposes she couldn't understand? "Here's what's going to happen," Alpha Blackstone announced. "You're going to tell us everything. Every conversation, every promise, every moment you spent alone with the pretender. And if you cooperate, if you help us understand the full scope of his plans, we might show mercy when this is all over." "And if I don't?" Lyra asked, though she already knew the answer. His smile was sharp as a blade. "Then you'll discover exactly why Omegas learned to fear us long before they learned to obey." As the Council Alphas closed in around her, Lyra realized that everything she thought she knew about her new life was about to be tested in ways she'd never imagined. But one question burned brighter than her fear. If King Damon had really been using her all along, why did the thought of betraying him feel like tearing out her own heart? The silver dagger flew past Lyra's ear so close she felt the wind from its blade. King Damon grabbed her arm and yanked her behind a marble pillar, just as 3 more weapons buried themselves in the stone where she'd been standing. "Stay down," he whispered, but his voice shook in a way that made her wolf whine with worry. Blood dripped from a cut on his forehead, and his usually perfect hair hung in dark tangles around his face. "Who's trying to kill us?" Lyra peeked around the pillar and saw shadows moving in the moonlit garden outside his study window. At least 6 figures dressed in black crept toward the palace, their movements too smooth and quiet to be normal wolves. "Assassins from the Shadow Council," Damon said, pulling a hidden blade from inside his desk drawer. "They've been hunting me for years, but they've never gotten this close before." He handed her a second knife, its handle warm from his touch. "Can you fight with this?" Lyra's fingers closed around the weapon, and something inside her chest roared to life. "I've been practicing with kitchen knives since I was 8. This should be fun." They moved together through his private rooms, like dancers who'd practiced the same routine for years. When a black-clothed figure smashed through the bedroom window, Lyra was already there, her blade finding the gap between his ribs before he could raise his own weapon. The assassin dropped without a sound. "Nice work," Damon said, but his smile looked forced. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool night air. "Are you hurt worse than you're telling me?" Lyra studied his face in the flickering candlelight. Something was wrong. His scent had changed, becoming sharper and more desperate. Before he could answer, Elena Blackthorne stepped through the broken window like she owned the place. Her perfect blonde hair didn't have a single strand out of place, and her dress looked like she was going to a fancy party instead of breaking into the king's bedroom. "Hello, darling," she purred, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "Miss me?" Lyra's blood turned to ice water. "You're working with them?" Elena laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Working with them? Oh, sweet little kitchen mouse, I'm leading them." She pulled a wicked curved blade from beneath her silk cloak. "Did you really think someone like you could steal what belongs to someone like me?" "Lyra doesn't belong to anyone," Damon snarled, moving to stand between them. But Lyra noticed how his left hand trembled as he raised his weapon. "How touching," Elena said. "The false king protecting his pet Omega. But you see, I know your secret, Damon. I know what you really are under all that borrowed power." The words hit like physical blows. Lyra saw Damon's face go white, saw his carefully controlled mask slip for just a moment. Whatever Elena knew, it was bad enough to shake the most powerful man in the kingdom. "What is she talking about?" Lyra asked. But neither of them answered her. "Tell her, darling," Elena suggested, her blade catching the moonlight as she twirled it between her fingers. "Tell your little guard dog why the council really wants you dead. Tell her about the blood tests. Tell her about the lies you've been living for 15 years. Damon's breathing became ragged, and Lyra caught a scent she'd never smelled on him before. Fear, deep and primal and desperate. "Elena, don't what? Don't tell her that the great Alpha King was born Omega just like her? Don't mention that every drop of royal blood in your veins comes from your mother's side? Not your father's? Don't explain how you've been using stolen magic to mask your true nature since you were 17? The words exploded in Lyra's mind like fireworks. She stared at Damon, seeing him with completely new eyes. The careful control, the way he always seemed to understand her struggles, the reason he'd chosen a rejected Omega as his guard when he could have had any warrior in the kingdom. Is it true? She whispered. Damon's shoulders sagged in defeat. Yes. How wonderfully romantic. Elena clapped her hands together like a child at a puppet show. Two broken Omegas finding love. Too bad you'll both be dead before sunrise. She raised her blade, but Lyra was already moving. All those years of hiding, of being told she was worthless, of watching stronger wolves take what should have been hers, it all turned into liquid fire in her veins. She caught Elena's wrist as the blade descended, her grip strong enough to make the other woman gasp in surprise. You made one mistake, princess. What's that, kitchen girl? You assumed I was still the weak little Omega you remember. Lyra twisted Elena's arm behind her back and pressed her own knife to the blonde woman's throat. But I've been learning from the best teacher in the kingdom, and he taught me that sometimes the most dangerous wolves are the ones everyone underestimates. Elena struggled, but Lyra held her firm. You can't kill me. I'm the daughter of an alpha. It would mean war between our packs. Maybe, Lyra said. Or maybe I'll just make sure you can never use that pretty voice to spread secrets again. Lyra. Damon's voice was soft but commanding. Let her go. What? She just tried to kill us both. And she failed. He moved to stand beside her. And despite everything Elena had revealed, despite the lies and the fear, he still looked like a king to Lyra. Elena Blackthorn, you will return to your father's pack and never set foot in my kingdom again. If you breathe a word of what you think you know to anyone, I will hunt you to the ends of the earth. Do you understand me? Elena nodded frantically, and Lyra released her. The blonde woman stumbled toward the window, pausing only to look back, with pure hatred burning in her eyes. This isn't over, she hissed. The council knows everything now. They'll never let you keep the throne, and they'll never accept her as your queen. Then she was gone, disappearing into the night like a bad dream. Lyra and Damon stood alone in the ruined room, surrounded by broken glass and blood, and the weight of secrets finally spoken aloud. So, Lyra said, trying to keep her voice light despite the chaos in her heart. You're really Omega? Born and raised in the servant quarters of my mother's pack, Damon admitted. Everything Elena said was true. I've been using borrowed magic to appear alpha since I claimed the throne. Lyra studied his face, the strong jaw, the commanding presence, the way other wolves naturally submitted to his authority. You don't feel Omega to me, because I'm not anymore, he said quietly. The magic changed more than just my scent and appearance. It changed something deep inside me. But the power comes with a price. It's slowly killing me. The confession hit her like a physical blow. What do you mean? Killing you? The spells require life force to maintain themselves. Every day I pretend to be something I'm not. I lose a piece of my true self. He touched the cut on his forehead, and she saw his hand shake again. I have maybe 6 months before the magic burns out completely. Then stop using it, Lyra said desperately. Just be yourself. Be Omega. I don't care what you were born as. Damon smiled sadly. It's not that simple, little wolf. The kingdom needs a strong alpha to protect it from the Shadow Council and worse threats. If they discover I'm powerless, every enemy we have will attack at once. You're not powerless, Lyra said fiercely. You're the smartest, bravest, most caring leader I've ever known. That has nothing to do with being Alpha or Omega. The other packs won't see it that way. Lyra took his hands in hers, feeling the tremor that ran through his fingers. Then we'll make them see it, together. For a moment, hope flickered in his storm-gray eyes. Then reality crashed back down around them. The council is coming, he said. Elena wasn't lying about that. They have proof of what I am, and they'll use it to destroy everything we've built here. How long do we have? Maybe a week? Maybe less? Lyra looked around the destroyed room, at the blood on the walls, and the broken glass scattered across the floor. 6 months ago, she would have been terrified. She would have hidden in the shadows and waited for someone else to fix things. But she wasn't that frightened Omega anymore. "Then we better get ready for war," she said. The Council of Seven arrived like a plague of locusts, their black carriages rolling through the palace gates as storm clouds gathered overhead. Lyra watched from her bedroom window as Alpha Thornwick stepped down from the lead carriage, his son Marcus limping beside him, his arm still in a sling from his fight with Daemon weeks ago. "They brought an army," she murmured, counting at least 50 armed wolves spreading across the courtyard below. Each one wore the silver armband of a council enforcer, and their weapons gleamed with deadly purpose. "I expected as much," Daemon said from behind her. He'd been pacing her room for the past hour, his usual calm shattered by the approaching confrontation. The magical disguise that made him appear alpha flickered around the edges like a candle flame in strong wind. "Your Majesty." Captain Ross knocked on the door and entered without waiting for permission. The grizzled old warrior had served 3 kings before Daemon, and his loyalty ran deeper than blood. "The council requests your immediate presence in the throne room." "Requests or demands?" Daemon asked dryly. "They used the word requires, sir, with about 20 armed guards to back up their vocabulary." Lyra felt her wolf stir restlessly under her skin. "This is a trap." "Of course it is." Daemon straightened his shoulders and smoothed down his hair, transforming back into the commanding presence she'd first met in the forest. "But we can't avoid it forever. They have the legal right to challenge a king's legitimacy if they have proof of deception." "And they do have proof," Lyra said quietly. "Thanks to Elena." "Yes." His jaw tightened with anger and something that looked like shame. "She managed to steal hair samples from my private quarters months ago." "Blood tests don't lie about someone's true nature," Captain Ross frowned. "Sir, I don't understand. What proof could they possibly have against you?" The old soldier had been like a father to Daemon, had trained him and guided him and never questioned his right to rule. The thought of disappointing him made Daemon's voice rough with emotion. "They know I was born Omega, Ross. They know everything." The captain's weathered face went through a dozen expressions: shock, confusion, understanding, and finally, something that looked like fierce pride. "Well, I'll be damned. That explains why you're twice the king your father ever was, Ross." "Don't you Ross me, boy. You think I care what you were born as? I've watched you lead this kingdom for 10 years. I've seen you make the hard choices, fight the battles that needed fighting, protect the people who couldn't protect themselves. That's what makes a king, not some accident of birth." Lyra felt her heart swell with gratitude for the old warrior. But their warm moment was interrupted by another knock on the door. "Your Majesty." A nervous young page stuck his head into the room. "Alpha Thornwick says, if you're not in the throne room in 5 minutes, they'll come get you themselves." "Let them try," Lyra snarled, her protective instincts flaring to life. The thought of anyone threatening Daemon made her want to shift and tear throats until the floor ran red. "Easy, little wolf." Daemon touched her shoulder gently. "We'll face this together, but we'll do it smart. Violence will only prove their point about Omegas being unstable." They walked to the throne room like they were heading to their own execution. The great hall had been transformed into a courtroom, with the 7 alphas of the council seated at a long table facing the throne. Alpha Thornwick sat in the center, his cold eyes fixed on Daemon with satisfaction. "Daemon Nightfall," Thornwick's voice boomed across the silent room. "You stand accused of fraud, deception, and crimes against the natural order. How do you answer these charges?" "I answer that I've served this kingdom faithfully for 10 years," Daemon replied, his voice steady despite the magical disguise flickering more violently around him. "My birth circumstances don't change that service." "Your birth circumstances make that service illegal," snapped Alpha Corvina from the Northlands, a sharp-faced woman who'd never liked Daemon's policies protecting weaker pack members. "Omegas cannot rule. It goes against everything our society is built on." Does it? Lyra stepped forward before anyone could stop her. Or does it go against your personal power? Because I've noticed that every alpha sitting at that table has gotten richer and more powerful, while the omegas in their packs have gotten poorer and more oppressed. The kitchen girl speaks out of turn, Marcus sneered, rising from his chair beside his father. Perhaps someone should remind her of her place. Her place, Damon said quietly, is wherever she chooses to stand. And right now, she chooses to stand with me. Alpha Thornwick pulled out a crystal vial filled with dark liquid. This is your blood, taken from items in your private quarters and tested by our most skilled healers. It shows beyond doubt that you were born Omega, not Alpha. The magical disguise around Damon shattered like glass, revealing his true scent to everyone in the room. Several of the council members recoiled as if struck, their faces showing disgust and betrayal. Abomination, whispered Alpha Corvina. Freak, added Marcus. Enough. Captain Ross stepped forward, his hand on his sword. I don't care if His Majesty was born a three-legged purple unicorn. He's still the best leader this kingdom has ever had. The old soldier's loyalty is touching, but irrelevant, Thornwick said. The law is clear. Omegas cannot hold positions of authority. Damon Nightfall. By the power invested in the Council of Seven, we strip you of your crown and sentence you to exile. And what of the kingdom? Damon asked. Who will protect it from the Shadow Council? From the rogue packs in the borderlands? From the vampire covens that have been testing our defenses? That will be my concern, Marcus said, puffing out his chest with pride. As the new Alpha King, the words hit the room like a thunderbolt. Even some of the other council members looked surprised. Marcus, Thornwick continued, has agreed to take the throne and restore proper order to the kingdom. His first act will be to return all Omegas to their rightful places as servants and breeders. Lyra felt something snap inside her chest. All the progress they'd made, all the young Omegas who'd been given hope and opportunity, all the changes that had made life better for the weakest members of their society, it would all be destroyed. No, she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. I beg your pardon? Thornwick raised an eyebrow. I said no. Lyra walked to stand directly in front of the council table, her chin raised defiantly. You don't get to destroy everything good and decent about this kingdom just because you're afraid of change. You forget yourself, Omega, Marcus snarled. When I'm king, you'll learn proper respect. When you're king, Lyra said softly, this kingdom will burn. She turned to face the assembled crowd of nobles and guards and servants who'd gathered to watch the proceedings. Many of them looked confused and frightened by the rapid changes happening around them. Look around you, she called out, her voice carrying to every corner of the great hall. Look at what this kingdom has become under King Damon's rule. The roads are safe for travelers. The harvests have been good. Children go to bed fed and protected. Omegas have been given chances to prove their worth instead of being treated like property. Pretty words from a kitchen girl, Alpha Corvina interrupted. But the law is the law. Then maybe it's time to change the law, Lyra shot back. Maybe it's time to judge leaders by their actions instead of their bloodlines. Impossible, Thornwick declared. The natural order cannot be overturned by the whims of servants and outcasts. Then let's test that natural order, Lyra said, and her voice carried a new note, something wild and dangerous that made every wolf in the room take notice. I challenge Marcus Thornwick for the right to rule this kingdom. The throne room erupted in chaos. Guards shouted, nobles gasped, and the council members leaped to their feet in outrage. Preposterous! Thornwick roared. An Omega cannot challenge for the throne. Why not? Lyra demanded. If birth doesn't matter, if it's all about strength and leadership ability, then prove it. Let your son face me in single combat, and may the best wolf win. Marcus laughed harshly. I'll tear you apart, kitchen girl. It'll be over in seconds. Maybe, Lyra agreed. Or maybe you'll discover that 10 years of believing your own propaganda has made you soft and weak. She looked directly at Damon, seeing the mixture of pride and terror in his storm-gray eyes. He'd taught her to fight, But this was beyond anything they'd practiced together. "If I win," she continued, "King Damon keeps his throne, and we rule together as partners. If I lose, you can exile us both and crown whoever you want." "And if you die?" Damon asked quietly. Lyra smiled, feeling wild and free, and completely unafraid for the first time in her life. "Then at least I'll die fighting instead of bowing." The council members huddled together, whispering frantically among themselves. Finally, Thornwick stood up. "Very well," he announced. "The challenge is accepted. Tomorrow at dawn, in the old arena. Single combat to the death." As the crowd began to disperse, Damon caught Lyra's arm. "Are you completely insane?" he asked, but his voice held admiration along with fear. "Probably," she admitted, "but I'm tired of letting other people decide what I'm worth. Win or lose, tomorrow they'll know that this Omega fought like a queen." Thunder rumbled overhead as they left the throne room, and Lyra couldn't tell if it was a promise or a warning. The sound of breaking glass exploded through the castle like a thunderclap, and Lyra's eyes snapped open to find her bedroom window shattered into 1,000 silver pieces. 3 masked figures, dressed in black, stood in her room, their eyes glowing yellow in the moonlight, and the biggest one held a rope that smelled like wolfsbane, the one plant that could make any shifter as weak as a newborn puppy. "Grab the Omega," the leader hissed, his voice rough like sandpaper. "The council wants her alive to watch her fake king die." But Lyra wasn't the same frightened girl who used to hide in shadows anymore. She rolled off her bed faster than lightning, her bare feet hitting the cold stone floor as her wolf surged to life inside her chest. The silver pendant Damon had given her grew warm against her skin, and suddenly she felt stronger than she ever had in her whole life. "You made one big mistake," she said, grabbing the hidden sword from under her mattress. "You woke up the wrong wolf." The first attacker lunged at her with claws extended, but Lyra spun away like a dancer, her blade singing through the air. She'd spent every morning for months training with the king's best warriors, learning moves that most Omegas weren't even allowed to watch. Now all that secret practice paid off as she fought like her life depended on it, because it did. "She's not supposed to fight like that!" the second attacker shouted, stumbling backward as Lyra's sword cut through his shirt. "Omegas don't know warrior moves!" "This one does," Lyra growled, her wolf's strength flowing through her muscles like liquid fire. Through her broken window, she could see orange flames dancing in the throne room windows 3 floors below. Smoke was rising into the night sky, and somewhere in that burning building, Damon was fighting for his life. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird, desperate to escape. The third attacker tried to throw the wolfsbane rope around her neck, but Lyra ducked and swept his legs out from under him. As he crashed to the floor, she heard footsteps pounding up the stone stairs outside her room. More enemies were coming, and she was trapped. But then she remembered something Damon had taught her during their first training session. Sometimes the best way out is through. Instead of running toward the door like they expected, Lyra sprinted straight toward her shattered window. The 3 attackers shouted in surprise as she leaped onto the windowsill, her bare feet balanced on the narrow stone ledge 3 stories above the courtyard. "She's completely crazy," one of them yelled. Maybe she was crazy, but crazy might be exactly what she needed to save the man she loved. Lyra took a deep breath and jumped. The wind rushed past her face as she fell, but instead of hitting the hard stones below, she grabbed onto the thick ivy that covered the castle walls. Her hands burned as she slid down the green vines, but she didn't stop until her feet touched solid ground. The courtyard was filled with wolves fighting wolves. She could smell blood and fear in the air, mixed with smoke from the fires burning inside the castle. Some of the king's loyal guards were battling against other wolves she recognized, members of the council who had decided that Damon didn't deserve to be their leader. "There she is," someone shouted. "Get the Omega." But as Lyra ran across the courtyard toward the throne room, something strange started happening. Her body began to feel different, stronger, like electricity was running through her veins. The silver pendant around her neck was getting hotter, and her wolf was howling inside her chest with a sound she'd never heard before. She burst through the throne room doors to find Daemon chained to a silver post in the center of the room, his shirt torn and bloody. 7 council members stood around him in a circle, their faces twisted with hate and satisfaction. "Finally," said Alpha Thornwick, Marcus's father, "the little pet arrives just in time to watch her master die." Elena stood beside him, her beautiful face cold as winter ice. "Did you really think you could steal what was meant for me?" She sneered at Lyra. "I was supposed to be queen, not some worthless kitchen girl." But Lyra wasn't listening to their words anymore. All she could see was Daemon's gray eyes looking at her, with love and hope and complete faith that she would find a way to save them both. All she could feel was the burning anger that had been growing inside her for 22 years of being told she wasn't good enough. "You want to see what an Omega can do?" Lyra asked, her voice getting deeper and more dangerous with every word. "Let me show you." The transformation began like sunrise breaking over mountains. Power flooded through Lyra's body, making her taller, stronger, fiercer than she had ever imagined possible. The silver chains holding Daemon began to crack and break as her new strength touched them. And for the first time in her life, Lyra understood exactly who she was meant to be. 2 years had passed since the night everything changed, and Queen Lyra still woke up sometimes expecting to find herself back in the tiny servants' room where she used to sleep on a bed made of old blankets. Instead, she opened her eyes to silk sheets the color of morning sky and windows that looked out over gardens where children from every pack played together without caring who was Alpha or Omega or anything in between. "Good morning, my queen," Daemon whispered against her ear, his arm tightening around her waist. Even after all this time, hearing him call her, that still made butterflies dance in her stomach. She turned to face him, studying the scar on his chin that he'd gotten during their final battle with the council. It had healed into a thin white line that she loved to trace with her fingertip, because it reminded her how they had fought side by side and won. "What's on your mind?" he asked, because he could always tell when she was thinking deep thoughts. "I was remembering," she said, sitting up to look out the window at the training grounds below. "Do you see that little girl down there? The one with red hair who keeps getting knocked down but won't stay down?" Daemon followed her gaze to where a small Omega child was sparring with wolves twice her size. Every time she hit the ground, she bounced back up, with determination burning in her green eyes. "That's exactly how you looked," he said with a smile in his voice. "Still do, actually." Lyra laughed and pulled on her robe, walking to their private balcony where breakfast waited on a table carved from white marble. The morning air smelled like roses and fresh bread, but underneath those pleasant scents, she could detect something else. The unique smell that meant visitors were coming to the castle. "We have company arriving," she told Daemon as he joined her outside. 3 different packs, if my nose is right. "The Unity celebration starts tomorrow," he reminded her, settling into his chair and pouring coffee that steamed in the cool morning air. "Representatives from every pack in the kingdom are coming to celebrate the 2nd anniversary of the new laws." The new laws? Lyra's laws, really, though Daemon had helped her write them. Laws that said Omegas could train as warriors if they wanted. Laws that said pack rank had to be earned through skill and wisdom, not just the family you were born into. Laws that said no wolf could be forced to accept a mate they didn't choose. Some packs had fought against the changes at first. There had been 3 more battles after that terrible night in the throne room, and twice Lyra had to prove herself in single combat against alphas who thought she was too weak to lead. She still had scars on her arms from those fights, but she wore them proudly because each one represented another step toward making their world better. "Mira sent a message this morning," Daemon said, handing her a piece of paper with her old friend's familiar handwriting. "The Omega Academy graduated its first class of warrior guards last week. 50 new protectors, all trained to the same standards as traditional Alpha guards." Lyra felt her heart swell with pride. Mira had been the perfect choice to run the academy. patient enough to teach frightened young Omegas that they were stronger than they knew, but fierce enough to push them when they tried to quit. "What about Marcus?" Lyra asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. "Any word from the Border Patrol?" Damon's expression grew serious. "He saved an entire village from rogue wolves last month. His commanding officer says he's finally learning that true strength means protecting others, not hurting them." It had taken Marcus almost a year to understand why Lyra and Damon had given him a second chance instead of throwing him in the dungeon forever. Even now, she wasn't completely sure he'd changed for the right reasons. But people deserved the opportunity to grow, and everyone made mistakes when they were young and angry. A knock on their bedroom door interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," Damon called. Captain Sarah, the head of their personal guard, stepped onto the balcony with a scroll in her hands. "Your Majesties, we've received an urgent message from the Northern Territories." Lyra's stomach tightened with worry. The Northern Territories were wild lands where rogue wolves gathered, and news from there was usually bad news. "What does it say?" she asked, taking the scroll and breaking the wax seal. As she read the message, her eyes grew wide with surprise instead of fear. "They want to join the kingdom," she said, looking up at Damon with amazement. "The Northern Territories want to accept our laws and become part of the unified Pax." "All of them?" Damon asked, leaning forward with interest. "According to this, yes. They say they're tired of fighting each other all the time. They want to try our way of living, where strength comes from working together instead of trying to destroy each other." Captain Sarah smiled, her weathered face creasing with laugh lines. "That makes us the largest wolf kingdom in recorded history, doesn't it?" Lyra set down the message and walked back to the balcony railing, looking out over the lands she now called home. In the distance, she could see the mountains where she used to dream of running away to live by herself. Now those same mountains marked the edge of a kingdom where every wolf had the chance to become their best self. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't found me that day in the forest?" she asked Damon. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, his chin resting on top of her head. "Every single day," he said quietly. "And every single day, I'm grateful I was smart enough to recognize a queen when I saw one." Lyra leaned back against his chest and watched the red-haired Omega girl finally pin her much larger sparring partner. The other children cheered, and the girl's face lit up with the kind of joy that came from discovering you were capable of amazing things. "Ready for another day of changing the world?" Damon asked. Lyra smiled and turned in his arms, seeing her reflection in his storm-gray eyes. Not the frightened servant girl she used to be, but a confident woman who had learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was refuse to accept the limitations others tried to put on you. "Always," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. After all, she was exactly who she was meant to be.